I preach authenticity, I preach being genuine, and I've been living a lie. And when the truth comes out, these things that I'm hiding are going to hurt other people.
Like your mom's person you're supposed to trust, like, only. Like, if you can't trust anyone else, you can trust her. But now it's like, wow, I can't trust anyone in the world anymore.
Jamal did not find out some small family detail. He found out his whole story had been missing pieces, and the person who hid them was the one person he thought would never do that to him. A hidden brother would shake anyone. A hidden sister too, after that first blow, turns pain into something colder. This stops being a family secret and starts feeling like a stolen truth. Welcome back to the channel, I'm Sabrine Rose. Subscribe if you want sharp, honest reality TV commentary with the fluff stripped out, and tell me in the comments if your closest family member hid something this huge from you. Would trust ever come back the same? Because this is where Kimberly's image crashes into Kimberly's pattern. She talks about honesty. She talks about being genuine. She talks like someone who has learned from heartbreak, bad choices, and public embarrassment. But Jamal is sitting inside the fallout of a secret big enough to redraw who he thought he was, who his family was, and what his mother's love was built on. And that is why this story hits harder than messy dating drama. When did she plan to tell him, if ever? How many years did this stay buried? Why did Larry have to surface through outside discovery? How does Jamal process 2 hidden siblings after living as an only child? And if Kimberly hid this, what else did silence protect? This was supposed to be her comeback season. Better health, better judgment, better choices. The problem is, growth sounds good out loud. Pattern shows up under pressure. Kimberly wants this chapter to look like proof. New body, new energy, new attitude, new rules. She is lighter, more confident, back outside, back flirting, back telling herself and the audience that the old version of her is finished. On paper, this is the kind of reset reality TV loves. A woman gets hurt, gets wiser, cleans up her choices, and walks back into the dating pool with better instincts. That is the image. That is the sales pitch. And for a minute, the show almost gets you to buy it. The laser tag date is built to support that comeback. The guy is closer to her age. He is not wrapped in fantasy. He is not selling some long-distance dream. He looks like a safer pick, at least until he starts talking. Then the warning signs start blinking so hard they may as well have come with a siren. He lives with women. One of them is his ex. Then he admits he cheated. At that point, Kimberly does not need emotional intelligence, growth, or spiritual rebirth. She needs basic hearing. Any person with functioning instincts would pause. So yes, she rejects him. She sees the mess. She names the red flags. She sounds clear. She sounds sharper. She sounds like someone who finally got tired of grading men on a curve so low it was somewhere under the floorboards. The problem is, this scene is easy. That is why it matters. Rejecting chaos is not hard when the chaos is unattractive to you. That date does not prove Kimberly changed at the root. It proves she can identify bad news when there is no fantasy attached, no craving, no emotional hook, no private hope whispering, maybe this one will turn into something. Anybody can look decisive when the man in front of them makes the decision simple. The tougher test comes when the attention feels flattering, the chemistry feels real, and the red flags arrive wearing nicer packaging. So this date should not be read as victory. It should be read as a setup. Kimberly looks wiser here because the risk is obvious and the desire is low. The question is what happens when she wants the outcome badly enough to start editing what she sees. And that question lands hard, because standards are easy to announce. The issue is whether they still exist once desire walks into the room. Then, the show gives Kimberly one of those scenes that makes you want to crawl behind your own sofa out of sympathy. Her friends drag her into a singles event and decide without much warning that the best way to help her date is to pitch her like a timeshare with feelings, not a quiet introduction, not a casual setup, a full public presentation, a PowerPoint. Because nothing says romance like being marketed under fluorescent lighting to a room full of strangers who did not ask for a slideshow. And the awkwardness gets worse fast. Most of the men in the room look younger. Kimberly is visibly uncomfortable. Her friends mean well, sure, but good intentions do not stop a bad idea from being a bad idea. This whole setup feels less like support and more like public relations for somebody's aunt after 2 margaritas and too much confidence. You can almost feel Kimberly wanting to teleport out of the room. And this is where the story stops being funny and starts being revealing. Because while her friends are acting like she is one lonely night away from needing emergency male attention, Kimberly already has something going on in private. She is not leaving that event to go home and journal about love. She has a secret arrangement waiting in the wings. Enter B. Now the energy shifts. B is not being introduced as a serious boyfriend. He is the hidden option. The private comfort, the person her friends do not know, is already in rotation. And that matters, because he becomes the second test of Kimberly's supposed growth. The first man was easy to reject because his problems were loud, public, and deeply unsexy. B is different. B comes with chemistry, secrecy, and enough ambiguity to let Kimberly start telling herself a nicer story. So the contradiction lands hard. She shut the door on one unstable man with total confidence. Meanwhile, she is already opening a window for another. B is where Kimberly's comeback story starts slipping on its own lipstick. Because the setup is not clean, not stable, and not pointing in the same direction for both people. They are meeting in hotels every couple of weeks, keeping the whole thing tucked away in a space built for convenience, not commitment. His roommate situation is still hanging there. The excuse changes shape, but the pattern does not. One man living with women was a screaming red flag when she met him over laser tag. With B, the instability suddenly becomes manageable, explainable, easy to wave past. And then there is the part where B floats a group sex angle and Kimberly pushes back. Fair enough. She is allowed to have limits. She should have limits. The issue is what happens after that. Because even after hearing something that should force a harder pause, she is still emotionally leaning in. Not because the facts improved, not because B suddenly offered clarity, exclusivity, or a future. She stays leaning in because she wants the situation to mean more than he appears to mean by it. That is the trap. This is not about shaming Kimberly for having a friends with benefits situation. Adults make messy choices every day. The sharper point is that she keeps describing herself like a woman with standards carved in stone, while quietly turning those standards into wet clay the second a man gives her enough chemistry to start building fantasy on top of confusion. She is not missing the red flags. She is rewriting them. B looks less like a boyfriend and more like a man who likes access, freedom, and low responsibility. Kimberly looks less like someone enjoying a casual setup and more like someone trying to emotionally upgrade a casual setup from the inside. That mismatch is where the discomfort lives. She wants progression. He seems comfortable with repetition. She wants the story to grow. He seems fine keeping the story parked exactly where it is. So now the pattern gets clearer. Kimberly does not only fall for unstable situations, she edits unstable situations until they feel like they might turn into love. And once you see her doing that in romance, the next question gets harder to ignore. If she can bend reality this much when her heart is involved, where else has she been bending it? Then the show cuts away from hotel room confusion and drops us into something colder. Jamal comes by the house, grabs food from the fridge, says what he needs to say, and leaves. On paper, nothing huge happens. No screaming. No door slamming. No dramatic speech with music begging you to cry. But this is one of those moments where the silence does more damage than shouting ever could. Because distance in a close relationship is never neutral. It means something broke. Jamal barely settles in. He does not linger. He does not look comfortable. Even the eye contact feels rationed. Kimberly is standing near her son, but emotionally she looks miles away from him. And that is what makes the scene sting. This is not a mother and son fighting over some petty misunderstanding. This is a mother and son moving around each other like one wrong sentence could reopen a wound that is already bleeding under the surface. The loudest part of this scene is everything neither of them wants to say yet. Kimberly tries to frame the pain in her own words. She talks about preaching authenticity, about preaching genuineness, about living a lie. That confession matters because it tells you she knows this is not some random mistake. She knows the issue is bigger than one awkward conversation. She knows the secret hit the relationship at its foundation. When the person you trust most admits they have been hiding part of reality, the problem is no longer the information. The problem is the ground under every memory. And the show smartly waits before giving the full answer. It lets the dread sit there. What kind of truth could make Jamal look at his mother like this? What kind of secret could turn an ordinary fridge visit into a scene full of emotional frost? Then one name enters the room and changes the temperature again. Larry. Then Kimberly says the sentence that changes the whole story. Jamal is not her only child. And once that lands, the tension from every earlier scene stops feeling vague and starts feeling earned. This is not a small omission. This is not a detail lost in time. This is a missing branch of Jamal's own family tree hidden by the person who helped create it. Kimberly explains that before Jamal, she got pregnant by the same man, Jamal's father. She says they were both in the military, that he cheated on her, and that when she became pregnant the first time, he wanted her to have an abortion. She did not do that. She gave birth, and that child, Larry, was placed for adoption. Years passed. Jamal grew up believing he was an only child. Then the buried past came back through an ancestry website when Larry found them. Not through a long-planned confession. Not through Kimberly deciding the time had come. Through outside discovery. And that detail matters, because it makes the truth feel less revealed than forced into daylight. For Kimberly, this is tied to shame, pain, and a chapter she clearly never learned how to carry in the open. For Jamal, the emotional math is different. He is not sitting there processing a fact, he is processing an altered identity. His whole life, family meant one thing. Overnight, it means something else. His mother was not the safest source of truth in the room. She was the gatekeeper of a reality he never got to know. This is where a secret stops being history and starts becoming betrayal. That is why Jamal's hurt lands so hard. He is not reacting like someone who got late news. He is reacting like someone who realized the foundation under his life had missing pieces on purpose. And once that trust cracks, the damage spreads fast. Because if your mother hid your brother from you your whole life, what still feels solid after that? Jamal's reaction is not exaggerated. If anything, it feels restrained for the size of the blow. He is not only hurt because Kimberly kept a secret, he is hurt because the secret changes the meaning of trust itself. A mother is supposed to be the person who gives you your first sense of safety. So when the person in that role admits she kept a life-size truth buried for years, the damage is not limited to one conversation. It spills backward. Old memories start looking different. Old assumptions start feeling shaky. Even love starts coming with a question mark attached to it. And Kimberly's side cannot be dismissed either. The adoption story sounds painful. The shame sounds real. The fear sounds real too. Telling your son that before him there was another child, another loss, another wound tied to the same father, that would be a brutal conversation for anyone. So yes, this was hard. Yes, this was heavy. Yes, part of her silence likely came from pain she never properly dealt with. But pain and accountability are not the same thing. That is the part this story refuses to soften. Kimberly can be wounded and still wrong. She can love Jamal deeply and still fail him deeply. She can tell herself she was protecting the bond, while the bond was being built on missing truth the entire time. And once you see that, the tragedy changes shape. This is no longer only about a woman carrying an old secret. This is about what happens when love leans on silence for too long. Silence starts acting like glue. Then one day the truth arrives and the whole structure gives way at once. Love sounds warm, but without truth under it, the ground stays weak. That is why Jamal's distrust feels bigger than anger. Anger can cool down. Distrust changes the air in the room. It makes every answer feel incomplete. Every explanation feel late. Every apology feel smaller than the wound. And Kimberly is still trying to catch up to that. Because as devastating as Larry's reveal already is, the story still has one more blade hidden behind its back. Larry was not the only secret. Then comes the second blow, and this is the point where the story stops feeling like one buried wound and starts looking like a whole system of concealment. Kimberly reveals Larry was not the only child she placed for adoption. There was also a daughter. And with that one admission, the emotional math changes again. Jamal is no longer dealing with a single hidden brother who surfaced late. He is dealing with the possibility that his family history was never partly hidden. It was managed in pieces, released only when pressure made silence impossible. That is why this reveal hits harder than a normal twist. A first secret can still be framed as one unbearable chapter someone could not face. A second secret starts looking less like one impossible memory and more like a lifelong method. Hide the painful part, delay the conversation, keep moving. Hope the truth stays buried long enough to stop controlling the present. But buried truth does not stay buried. It leaks into everything. So the question gets sharper now. Did Jamal lose trust because of one secret? Or because the first secret taught him there could always be another one waiting behind it? That is a darker kind of damage. Once somebody rewrites your sense of family once, every new revelation starts to feel less like news and more like proof of pattern. And once pattern enters the story, forgiveness gets harder because the pain stops feeling accidental. To be fair, none of this means Kimberly felt nothing. In my opinion, it suggests the opposite. She likely carried so much shame and fear that postponing truth became her survival habit. But survival habits do not stay private when other people's identities are tied up in them. And now, the blast radius gets wider. This is not only Jamal's shock anymore. Larry found one truth through ancestry and reconnection. Now he has another truth waiting for him too. A hidden sister does not only rewrite Jamal's world, it rewrites Larry's. By this point, the dating mess and the family secret stop looking like two separate plots. They start looking like the same habit wearing different clothes. Kimberly says she has learned from the past, then steps back into the same emotional fog with different lighting. She says she wants honesty, then waits until truth is cornered before letting it speak. She says she can spot red flags, then starts bargaining with them the second hope gets involved. She says she is protecting love, but over and over she ends up protecting silence instead. That is the pattern. And once you see it, the whole season reads differently. The laser tag guy was easy to reject because the red flags were obvious and there was no emotional investment pushing her to reinterpret them. B was harder because chemistry gave chaos a softer face. Larry was harder because shame gave silence a moral excuse. The daughter's secret was harder still because by then concealment had turned into habit. Different situations, same loop. Delay the painful truth. Manage the discomfort. Keep the story together for one more day. Then act shocked when the truth returns with interest. This is not random mess. This is repetition with consequences. And to be fair, people do hide things out of fear. They hide things out of shame. They hide things because facing the truth would force them to relive pain they barely survived the first time. That part should not be mocked. It should be understood. Kimberly's silence did not come from nowhere. In my opinion, it came from wounds she never learned how to carry in daylight. But understanding motive is not the same as excusing impact. Because once your hidden truth starts shaping someone else's identity, once your silence decides what your son knows about his own family, once another child has to arrive through Dina instead of honesty, the secret stops being private coping. It becomes damage with a long fuse. And that is the brutal part of Kimberly's story. She did not only bury pain, she buried facts other people had a right to live with sooner. So now the last question sits over everything else. Jamal may still love his mother. That part seems clear. But love is one thing, trust is another. And when a person you love becomes the source of your deepest confusion, what happens next? Can Jamal keep loving Kimberly and still never trust her the same way again? Kimberly's real crisis was never her age, never the men, never the awkward public moments that reality TV loves to milk for easy laughs. Her real crisis was trust. Jamal did not only learn new family history, he learned that the person he saw as the safest place in his life had been deciding for years which parts of the truth he was allowed to live inside. That kind of damage does not stay in one conversation. It follows you into every future one. And that is why her comeback story never fully lands. The weight loss, the renewed confidence, the talk about better choices, all of that sounds good. But image is easy. Pattern is harder. Kimberly kept reaching for the language of authenticity while still living inside delay. Delay with men. Delay with truth. Delay with pain. Delay until the truth got so heavy it stopped feeling like honesty and started feeling like impact. That is the brutal part. She may have thought silence was protecting love. She may have thought waiting would spare Jamal pain. She may have thought keeping the hardest chapters buried was the kindest option left. But silence does not protect love when love depends on reality. Silence protects the person hiding. Everyone else pays later. And once trust breaks at the root, even love starts limping. So no, This does not end with some neat little bow where one apology fixes years of missing truth. Jamal might forgive parts of it, he might stay close, he might still love his mother deeply. But the old version of trust, the simple version, the childlike version where mom equals safety and truth in the same breath, that is the part that looks hardest to restore. Kimberly's problem was never only bad judgment. It was a lifelong habit of postponing pain until pain came back bigger. And the takeaway is painfully simple. If you keep hiding truth to preserve a relationship, you often end up damaging the exact bond you were trying to save. If you think this family fallout was rough, wait until you see the next reality TV story where the public mess looked loud, but the private betrayal cut even deeper.